Don't spill the Bordeaux. You couldn't afford it." The words cut through the air like a velvet-covered bullet bouncing off the chandeliers of the Marlowe before lodging deep into the chest of a room pretending to be elegant. Maya Brooks straightened her back. The silver tray pressed against her hip, left hand steady, right hand balanced. Light poured into her amber eyes, still as a lake before a storm. She heard her heartbeat counting 3 beats, 1 breath, the rhythm of nights she had long locked away in a quiet corner of memory. Composure was her armor, silence her weapon. At the VIP table, Philip Kane, 58, with a laugh that rang like an empty crystal glass, leaned back, jaw twitching in satisfaction. Beside him, Victoria, 52, crimson as a tightening ribbon, smiled with the edge of a blade. Trevor Miles, 31, his tan absurd in a Chicago winter, snapped his fingers as if commanding the air. Amber Reed, 27, giggled her oversized earrings, swaying like pendulums of privilege. They weren't laughing at a joke. They were laughing at a person. Maya lifted the bottle, the neck touching the rim of the glass, with a faint ting, delicate as a string being plucked. "I'll bring you a new glass, sir." Her voice was light and fine, but framed with steel. On her way back to the bar, she passed Neil Porter, 42, his forehead glistening with the sweat of quiet panic. "Stay away from Mr. Hart," he muttered, eyes darting toward the corner of the room. "You don't want trouble that kind." Then he melted back into the artificial laughter, as if the only trouble that existed was a rich man's displeasure. Daniel Hart. 40 sat alone, his suit minimal to the point of defiance. His watch understated his posture, modest but firm. He didn't look up, but he knew. When Maya passed, he glanced briefly. Their eyes met for half a second. Cold, clear, a quiet flame at the center. Maya gave a barely perceptible nod. Daniel didn't smile. He didn't need to. Behind the counter, Sam Ortiz, 34, rotated a glass until it became a mirror. "Family?" he asked when he saw Maya's fingers brush a worn photograph tucked in her apron, a young woman in uniform, sunlight filling her eyes. "Almost," Maya said. The smile stopped at the corner of her mouth, going no further. Sam understood. Some stories speak louder in silence. Chloe Park, 23, strode by as if walking a red carpet. Maya smiled a little. "You're killing the vibe." Her eyes dropped to Maya's worn black shoes. "And maybe I don't know. Try to look more polished." Maya placed a water jug on the tray and looked up just high enough. "I'm here to serve, not to perform." Chloe shrugged, tossing back a neat little smirk before gliding away to chase the reflection of someone richer. The Marlowe continued its theater of wealth glasses, clinking laughter, swelling deals, told like legends. But beneath the polished surface, the air thickened, a low-pressure mass creeping under the tables between the white linen cloths. Maya could feel it, the scent of ozone before a storm. The VIP table grew louder. Philip tapped his nails on the crystal glass, the rhythm steady like a drum summoning rain. "In that place you came from," he emphasized the word place like a needle through silk. "Did they teach you how to polish wine glasses?" Victoria gave a delicate laugh. Trevor winked at Amber, and Amber leaned in close. "She's probably more used to mopping floors." No lip tightening, no lowered gaze, only the faint whitening of her knuckles for a single heartbeat, then calm again. Inhale, hold release. Maya set her tray on the side table, aligning it at a perfect 90-degree angle, as if drawing an invisible boundary. Outside, the glass Michigan Avenue whipped winter wind into the night. The storm hadn't arrived yet, but the night knew it was coming. In the corner, Daniel put down his phone. His ears caught everything. A vein at his neck tensed, then vanished. He despised that kind of laughter from the deck of a ship, throwing jokes like stones at those struggling in cold water. Across the room, Neil was on his toes, waving discreetly, his gestures breaking midair. Sam froze with a towel in hand. Chloe rolled her eyes, scanning for a richer reflection to anchor her relevance. Maya returned with a new glass. Her movements were circular, smooth, slicing through air without friction. "Sir." The single word fell like a pebble into a deep well, leaving no echo. It should have ended there. But arrogance rarely knows where to stop. "Where are you from, Maya?" Victoria tilted her head, her voice sweet with hidden thorns. "Some cute little town, I imagine." Trevor let out a short laugh. Amber added softly, "She looks like she just walked out of a shelter." The words lined up small but sharp. The room paused for half a beat, as if waiting to see whether the cut would bleed. Maya saw her reflection in the wine's surface, a small figure standing inside a cage of crystal light. She heard the echo of footsteps deep within her bones, left, right, left. She lifted her head. No defense, no retort, just the quiet delivery of dinner with steady hands, returning to them the mirror they refused to face. "As you wish, sir. Enjoy your meal." Her voice dropped softly. Down the hall of light, the storm had already gathered, closing the horizon of an opulent night. And when it finally broke, people would look back to this moment and realize her silence had never been surrender. It was the stance of someone ready to stand her ground. Maya Brooks didn't stand in the room to be seen. She moved like an invisible thread, stitching together the torn corners of an opulent night, a half-empty water jug, a crooked napkin, a misplaced fork. Every motion she made was neat and quiet, like words gliding across smooth paper without a single scratch. Someone once taught her, "Don't make waves read them." She had memorized it until it became her heartbeat. Tonight, the waves were strange. Conversations rose a pitch higher, laughter clanged against itself like metal. The scent of truffle oil, red wine, and expensive perfume hung in the air so thick it was almost suffocating. But beneath that glossy shell, Maya sensed something else, a hollow space. She set the tray on the bar, her thumb unconsciously tracing the worn edge of a folded photo inside her apron pocket. In it, a 20-year-old girl in uniform, sunlight spilling across her shoulder, teammates laughing just beyond the frame. The faint sound of helicopter blades still echoed from somewhere far away. "Busy night," Sam Ortiz murmured, his hands never leaving the crystal glass he was polishing. "But the air feels restless." He glanced toward the VIP table where Philip Kane was holding court, pontificating about the personality of the market as if it were his right arm. "You good, Maya?" "I'm good," she replied. One word. Solid. Not because she wasn't tired, but because she knew her body would obey that order. At the entrance, Chloe Park greeted a new group of guests. Her smile stretched tight as a string. She shot Maya a glance, the kind that belonged to someone convinced the spotlight existed for her alone. "Remember to smile," Chloe reminded, as if a smile could turn condescension into something palatable. Maya didn't argue. Someone used to standing in strong winds doesn't waste breath trying to blow out a match. Turning down the hallway, Neil Porter caught her arm lightly. "Table 23 says their soup's cold. Fix it." And hey, his voice dropped, though his eyes stayed on the POS screen, "stay away from Mr. Hart." Same warning, same mantra for those who saw power as forbidden territory. One frown from a guest like that and I lose my bonus. Understood, Maya said. She understood more than that frowns could cost people their jobs, but wrong decisions could cost people their lives. In her former world, the word wrong had a much higher price. Daniel Hart didn't ask for distance. He sat quietly reading the menu like a report, his eyes sweeping the room now and then like a silent radar. What did he see Philip tapping his glass with his knuckle in self-satisfied rhythm? Victoria laughing exactly on cue, never too much, never too little. Trevor snapping a photo of the wine bottle slapping a cheap filter over something worth thousands. Amber tilting her head, flattering others by diminishing someone else. And Maya, steady, unhurried, unbothered. Daniel didn't know why she caught his attention. Maybe because she didn't hide behind noise. Maybe because she carried something he recognized, discipline the kind people born atop money treat as decoration. Maya carried a steaming bowl back to table 23, testing it against her wrist before placing it down. "Apologies for the inconvenience, ma'am, sir." The elderly woman looked at her longer than expected, the wrinkles around her eyes softening. "Thank you," she said quietly. The words fell gently but carried weight, a tiny bridge across the invisible gulf between the one who serves and the one being served. Across the room, Amber whispered to Victoria, "She's cold, the kind of cold that comes from always being on guard." Victoria smirked. "You're mistaken. That's the cold of someone who knows exactly where she stands." Both women laughed. The laughter hit the wooden floor and shattered into sharp, thin shards. Maya heard it. She didn't pick them up. She left them where they belonged. Returning to the bar, she spotted Eli, the 19-year-old busboy, whose eyes were still clear as morning. "Need more clean napkins?" he asked. "2 stacks, please," Maya replied, then added gently, "Be careful when you wear slick shoes in the kitchen." Eli nodded fast, as if she had just given him a secret recipe. Near 9:30, the air shifted color. The voices changed from stories of triumph to boasts too loud. A glass slipped off some table's edge and broke cleanly, the sound crisp and final. Guests gasped, laughed, and quickly forgot. Maya didn't. The crack sliced straight through her hearing. In her mind, the map of the dining room unfolded instantly. Main entrance, side exit, kitchen, storage bar, the space between 2 rows of tables, escape routes, choke points, obstacles. Everything slid into silent order. Sam caught the change in her eyes. "Something wrong?" he asked quietly. "Not yet," Maya said. "But the wind's shifting." Daniel set down his utensils, listening for a sound not coming from the speakers, the pulse of the room itself. He watched Maya move across the floor, saw how she tilted her body just enough to let another server pass without losing balance, saw how she lifted and lowered a tray without a single clatter. The small details sharpened into one clear conclusion: these weren't skills learned in a restaurant. Philip Kane raised his glass, peering through the Bordeaux like a scope. "That waitress," he murmured to Trevor. "I bet she drops that tray in 10 minutes. Trevor chuckled. 5. Bills exchanged hands light as paper. Amber added, "If she does record it, that'll make great content." Maya placed her hand on the edge of the tray, the metal's chill seeping into her skin like a reminder. She drew a slow breath in, exhaled longer. The waves were rising, but she was level. Beneath her calm skin was an old command: never let anyone dictate your rhythm. The chandelier trembled faintly, or maybe someone's eyes were just tired. At the door, the wind slipped in like a blade through a crack. The Marlowe still glittered like every night, but tonight something had flipped a different switch. The guard's footsteps slower than usual, a chair dragged too close to the wall, a shadow stretching farther than it should. Maya lifted her head. Her gaze swept the room like a silent beam of light. Someone just told another joke at the VIP table. Someone sighed by the fireplace. Someone outside the door was holding their breath. The waves touched the edge, and Maya was ready. Yet she remained silent, because true composure isn't shouting before the storm. It's adjusting your cuff, straightening the napkin, and keeping the surface still until the very last second. The glass fell, shattering crisp and dry like a warning shot. The room froze for half a beat, then carried on as if nothing had cracked. Only Maya heard the echo linger inside her bones, a thin fracture that ran deep. 7 months of night shifts had turned her into a compass needle, steady even in turbulence. She stood in the position where no one notices, but she sees everything between the aisle and the bar where the light broke into shards of gold. From there, she could hear the whispers of tablecloths, sense the wine rising to lips, and feel the fine thorns of arrogance hidden beneath laughter. Philip Kane raised his glass, mumbling about the psychological elasticity of the market as if describing his own heart expanding and contracting with profit. Victoria rested her chin on the back of her hand, her eyes sharp as needles that occasionally pierced through Maya with a cold glance. Trevor adjusted his jacket, taking a close-up shot of a wine bottle and captioning it, "An ordinary night for the not-so-ordinary." Amber sighed with manufactured bliss, tilting her head to catch another admiring gaze. As for Maya, she straightened the hem of her apron, folded her napkin into a perfect square. Beneath that discipline lay invisible cuts carved by 7 months of whispers, sneers, and jokes wrapped in orders. They had turned into smooth scars, not gone, just no longer bleeding. "You all right, Sam?" Ortiz asked again, eyes steady, even as his hands kept polishing glasses. He had seen plenty of people crack in this room, not from the workload, but from pride being worn down like the rim of a plate. "All right," Maya said. One word, needing no proof. Eli rushed by, clumsy and eager. "Here are the clean napkins, ma'am." "Thanks." She took them, noticing the faint tremor in his wrist, the tremor of someone who hadn't yet learned how to hide it. "Stick close to the wall. Fewer bumps that way," she said softly. Eli grinned, as if she'd handed him a lucky charm. Chloe Park leaned on the counter, her polished nails gleaming like glass. "Kitchen's out of butter knives. Send them 10. She glanced at Maya, her smile suspended in the air. "Honestly, if you smiled twice as much per round, your tips would look different." Maya didn't answer. Her eyes slid past Chloe's shoulder, stopping at the glass door where a shadow crossed outside. The steps were firm, quick, and gone. Neil Porter appeared again like a life buoy in a sea of money. "VIP table wants another bottle. And don't," he paused, lowering his voice. "Don't go near Mr. Hart." He pressed on the word "don't" like a shutter snapping shut. "Don't make the wrong people notice you." "Got it." Maya glanced toward the far corner. Daniel Hart placed his knife and fork side by side, perfectly parallel, like rails of a train track. His face stayed calm, but it wasn't a frozen calm. It was the kind that holds still water to see the bottom. Tonight the bottom was murkier than usual. He noticed the guard moving slower at the door, a chair slightly out of place, an uncommon mistake. And he noticed Maya moving as if she were measuring the wind. "She doesn't belong here," Victoria said, passing judgment. "Because she didn't ask permission to exist." Daniel thought, though his eyes remained on the menu. On another level, he respected that. Maya carried her tray back to table 14. The elderly woman from earlier smiled gently. "Dear, you have very quiet hands." The compliment fell softly like a drop of warm water on cold metal. "Thank you," Maya replied, bowing her head slightly, feeling her heart soften by a fraction, then tighten again as the wind whistled through the door crack like a wire saw. The chandelier trembled for the second time, barely noticeable. Maybe it was the draft from the door opening, maybe tired eyes. But her instincts weren't tired. They whispered coordinates inside her head main door, 24 steps, bar 7, kitchen 12, storage 19, VIP table 9 steps, and 1 expensive sentence. "Where are you from?" Victoria had asked earlier. That question still hung in the air, a trap scented like roses. "She looks like she came from a shelter," Amber had added. Words like those Maya had heard enough over the past 7 months. They never pierced past her second layer of skin, but they served another purpose. Signals. Sam suddenly looked up. "You hear that?" "I do," Maya replied, and their voices overlapped. It wasn't music. It wasn't glass. It was a silence stripped of air, the kind of silence where a room starts breathing through its mouth. Neil turned halfway around. Who locked? He didn't finish. The main door jerked as if pulled from the outside. A cold gust swept across the wooden floor, making the tablecloth edges ripple. At that moment, time changed its rhythm. It no longer flowed, it counted. Maya set the tray down her fingers, releasing the metal edge, her eyes closed briefly within a breath. Inhale, start point. Hold still. Exhale, ready. Ready not like someone waiting for trouble, but like someone who knows trouble always picks the biggest door to walk through. Philip tilted his glass, the Bordeaux chiming against crystal like a dare. Trevor laughed, drawing it out. Amber snapped another photo. Victoria smoothed the edge of her napkin across her lap. Daniel rested his hand lightly on the table, anchoring the room with a movement no one noticed. Then the door burst open. Wind. Footsteps. Shadows. 3 figures stormed through the threshold. Faces, masked, guns raised high. Everybody down. The voice was rough, gravelly, cutting straight through the room's stomach. Glass shattered, chairs toppled, screams were swallowed by the velvet curtains. Maya didn't scream. Her heartbeat shifted 2 beats, 1 breath. She didn't duck. She didn't stand tall. She stood exactly where she needed to be between the line of sight and the path to safety, between the crowd's fear and the cold focus of action. The invisible cuts of 7 months aligned into a single straight line from here to what had to be done. And at the end of that line wasn't victory. It was duty. The shout. Everybody down hadn't even finished echoing off the crystal ceiling before the room shattered into chaos. Chairs screeched, gowns swept across the floor. Tailored suits stumbled into table legs. Bordeaux spilled like blood, running down the white tablecloths. A single glass rolled, struck the wall, and burst its sound dry and cold. Maya Brooks stood in the middle aisle. She didn't crouch. She didn't move forward. Her body stayed in a state of calm readiness. Shoulders relaxed, knees, soft eyes wide enough to take in the entire room within one frame. The 3 masked men split apart like wedges of iron, one heavy set with a scar slashed across his eyebrow. The leader, one tall and thin, holding his gun loosely, eyes blinking with nervous instability. The last shorter shifting his weight like a man more familiar with knives than guns. At the VIP table, Philip Kane yanked Victoria down beneath the table. His Rolex caught the tablecloth, yanking down a cascade of glasses. Idiot, he hissed, cursing both fate and some invisible server in his mind. Victoria clutched her purse like a talisman, the sharp scent of her perfume cutting through the wooden air. "Don't look up," she whispered, though her own eyes were locked on the empty space shaped like a gun barrel. Trevor Miles was already kneeling, hands raised, lips trembling over the mantra, "Don't shoot." His phone slipped from his hand, the screen glowing uselessly like a blind eye. Amber Reed buried her face in her arm mascara, running into 2 black V's. Yet she still managed to whisper with the last trace of arrogance in her tone, "Why is that waitress still standing?" Then she went silent, swallowed by fear. Neil Porter. The manager crawled along the edge of the bar, half dragging, half sliding. "Down, everyone down," he ordered, but his eyes were searching for Maya, filled with panic and a silent plea, "Don't do anything reckless." Behind the bar, Sam Ortiz had already pressed the security button again. Through the reflection of a glass, he saw Maya, a straight line in a broken room still, but not from fear. He murmured a prayer so small it barely lasted a breath. Eli, the young busboy, hid behind the side kitchen counter. His wide eyes gleamed with terror as his hands clutched a stack of napkins like a soft shield. "Maya," he almost called out, but bit his lip, afraid that even his voice could betray them all. The room locked tight like a trembling photograph. Breaths came heavy. Knees scraped against the dark wooden floor. Jewelry struck crystal glasses with scattered chimes like falling hail. Gun shadows swept across the ceiling, slid over the tables, and cut across white suit collars, a cold streak like a blade. "Down, all of you." The leader's hoarse voice bounced off the crystal ceiling. He was broad-shouldered eyes hollow, a thin scar slicing across his left eyebrow. To his left was a tall, thin man, his hands shaking the gun, jerking in nervous spasms. To his right stood a short, silent man, his gaze always drifting toward his pocket, the habit of someone who trusted a knife more than a gun. The Marlowe, a place where people performed wealth, had become in an instant a patchwork shelter. Chairs toppled sideways. Evening gowns clung with red wine. A glass spun across the floor, hit the wall, and shattered with a dry crack. The jazz was gone. The only sounds left were primal pleas, sobs, and whispered prayers. Maya Brooks stood upright in the middle aisle. She did not kneel. She did not lunge forward. Her body held the posture of still readiness, shoulders released, knees, soft chin lowered, half an inch so her eyes could frame the entire room. Her breath shifted into an old rhythm, 2 beats per inhale, the pulse she had once trained for places where a single mistake could cost lives. The VIP table was chaos. Philip Kane yanked Victoria under the table, his Rolex catching the tablecloth pulling down a line of glasses. "Oh, God!" Victoria gasped, clutching her purse like a holy relic. Trevor crouched, babbling, "Don't shoot like a prayer." Amber buried her face in her arm, mascara bleeding into 2 black V's, yet she still managed to lift her head long enough to throw a look of contempt toward the fearless waitress. Neil Porter crawled along the bar's edge, his tie smeared with a Bordeaux streak that looked like a bloodless wound. "Down, everyone, down," he shouted, then looked up, searching for Maya. His eyes flickered with panic. "Don't be reckless." Behind the bar, Sam Ortiz pressed the emergency button, then stopped. Through the rim of a glass, he saw Maya like a straight line through a fractured room, still yet tense, calm yet alert. Eli, the busboy, barely out of his teens, crouched behind the side counter, clutching a stack of napkins as if it were a soft shield. "Maya," he almost called out, then swallowed it, afraid his voice might betray them all. The leader turned his head heavily like a rusted hinge and locked eyes on Maya. He took 3 steps forward, raising the gun. Distance, 1 breath. "Kneel!" he barked, pressing the cold barrel to her forehead, the small coin-sized metal point, heavy as a hammer. The air stepped back. Poisoned whispers dropped around the room like needles. "Is she crazy?" A woman in velvet gasped, her eyes wild with fear and anger. "Get down!" A man in a blue tie stammered, his voice cracking. "Don't drag us to die with you!" Someone hissed from the next table, the words slicing like a curse. Maya said nothing. The map in her mind unfolded on its own main door, 24 steps, kitchen 12, storage, 19 bar 7, 2 clear spaces wide enough for 3 people to crawl. 1 fire extinguisher hanging crooked tablecloth, slick enough to slide guards could enter from the left, and most importantly, the hands that trembled while holding weapons. The tall man swung his gun toward the tables by the fireplace. "Wallets, watches, phones, move," he shouted, each word shrill like a dull blade. The weapon shook with his hand, tracing an imaginary zigzag across people's chests. The elderly woman in velvet trembled, fumbling to unclasp her pearl necklace. The strand caught on a button 1 heartbeat too slow, risk stretched thin as a snapping string. The short man blocked the side exit, eyes flicking toward the glint of his knife before lifting his gaze again, no shouting, no threat. He was waiting for someone to slip to solve it clean. Knives whisper, not roar. That was why his calm was terrifying. "Kneel!" The leader barked again, pressing the muzzle deeper, the acrid scent of smoke hitting Maya's skin. "Get down, you fool!" A woman's voice shrieked, cracked with fear and spite. "Who do you think you are?" A man's voice spat sharp and dry. In the corner, Daniel Hart didn't move. He knew the danger margin of one wrong motion. But his eyes never left Maya. He saw her left shoulder drop her right wrist, hang loose the posture of someone holding an invisible tray. And suddenly, the empty tray wasn't a symbol of powerlessness. It was a space reserved for action. "You don't want to do this," Maya said softly, her words flat and calm, a mirror held up to his frenzy. He froze for 1/10 of a second, then roared, "Shut up!" The barrel pressed harder. Her skin turned cold, but her eyes stayed warm amber, reflecting the light. Under the VIP table, Victoria tried to rebuild her wall with perfume. "Lower yourself!" she hissed at Philip. But Philip only heard his own heart pounding off beat because for the first time in his life, a man used to ordering others to bow had to look up for his own life to a waitress. "Wallets! Watches!" The tall man shouted again, yanking the pearls from the old woman's neck. His gun swept another arc across the room. "Don't shoot!" Neil cried, but his voice was muffled by fear. Sam whispered, "Oh God," into the dry glass. Eli bit his lip until it bled. Maya tilted her head slightly, half a degree. From that narrow angle she saw the full picture, the leader's wrist slick with sweat, his elbow raised too high, his stance off-center. The tall man distracted with the stolen wallet, the short man lowering his center, readying his knife. Above them the chandelier trembled wind slipping through the door. Beneath her, her low heels gripped the floor like anchors on a ship deck. "She'll get us all killed!" a voice screamed, slicing through the air. The crowd needed a scapegoat to pin their terror on. They chose the one who stood the easiest choice. Maya inhaled, held, released. Inside her chest, an old command lit up, lock the barrel strip. The force find, the joint neutralize. No one heard it, but everyone would see the result. Neil gasped. "Don't!" The tall one roared, "Stay still!" Eli broke off mid-sentence. "Please don't." Daniel said nothing. Only a single spark gathered in his eyes' precision. In the instant before the storm, the room went silent. Not because fear had ended, but because it had peaked. At that summit, every sound collapsed into one, the single exhale of a woman standing before a gun. Maya lifted the hand that had once held the empty tray, placing it in the half-breath of space between herself and violence. She chose to let fear flow down into her feet, anchoring her to the ground. In that moment, dignity was not a slogan. It was muscle keeping the axis steady. The leader's right shoulder shifted instinctively, his aim slipping half a span. Now! The night held its breath, and the storm opened its eyes. Second one, the air snapped like a string pulled too tight. Maya tilted her head half a degree. Her right hand shot up, clamping over the leader's wrist, twisting the barrel away from her forehead. Cold metal scraped her skin, leaving a sting. The stench of smoke hit her nose. He flinched, shoulder-tightening control, slipping one notch. Second two, her left heel pivoted hips, locked wrist dropped in a clean joint cutting motion. Pain shot through his forearm, his fingers released on reflex. The gun flew upward in a perfect arc, spinning slowly in everyone's eyes like a slow-motion reel. But for Maya, it was falling right on rhythm. Second three, her left elbow struck across. A dry crack echoed at the corner of his jaw. His eyes popped open, head snapping sideways, nerves shouting orders his body couldn't follow. He fell backward like a bag with its string cut. Second four. Maya paused for half a beat, just enough to catch the gun with the back of her hand, slide it across the side table, and place it down on the still, flat white cloth. Her other hand held the imaginary tray position of a server, steady and quiet. She had restored order to one object before turning back to chaos. Second five, the leader collapsed. Under the table, Victoria lifted her head for air, her makeup cracking all at once. Philip peeked out, his borrowed power gone, leaving only fear. At the bar, Sam's shoulders loosened, and a dear God fell into an empty glass. Second 6. The tall, thin man screamed. His gun barrel trembled like a broken sewing needle sweeping across the guests' chests. An elderly woman fumbled with her pearls, hands, slow eyes wet. "Don't," Neil began. But before the words reached air, Maya bent low, cutting under the line of danger like a blade. Second 7. Her forearm swept his wrist outward, the gun sliding off course into a harmless black streak. Her right leg snapped up like a spring striking his soft belly. The air rushed from his lungs with a hoarse grunt. He staggered back, crashed into the glass table. Second 8 crystal exploded like a shower of stars. Shards flared around Maya, and in those tiny mirrors, her amber eyes stayed calm, not triumphant, not excited, only focused. Second 9 voices burst out. "She's crazy! She'll get us killed!" The crowd quickly molded their fear into accusation. Maya heard, but didn't receive it. The word crazy slipped off her ears like rain off an umbrella. Second 10. The third man moved silently, the habit of one who preferred knives. His blade glinted under the chandelier, tracing a low diagonal toward her left side. He didn't shout, didn't threaten. He meant to finish it fast. That quiet made him stand out most clearly to Maya's eyes. Second 11, she flicked her wrist, trapping his tendon, twisting his hand, borrowing his own force to reverse the blade. The steel changed owners within half a heartbeat, the handle landing in her palm, the point turned outward far from the crowd. No one gets cut, she reminded herself, as if reciting a rule aloud. Second 12. Her elbow pressed down on the back of his neck, her sidestep turned her weight into a command. His forehead hit the floor with a deep thud, final and solid. The knife fell from his hand along with his will. The room heard its own collective breathing, rough, broken, uneven. Second 13. The tall, thin man crawled among shattered glass, reaching for his gun. Maya didn't give him time. She grabbed his collar, twisted his balance, and slammed him across the table's edge. A short strike compact force clean finish. He collapsed onto the carpet, arms spread wide like a fallen scarecrow. Second 14. She stepped back half a pace, placed the knife on the table, with the handle turned toward her, a declaration of no threat. Both her hands opened. "It's over!" The words fell round and steady, pressing down on every sob. Behind the counter, Eli held his breath, then exhaled a trembling, "Oh God," not sure who it was meant for. Second 15 silence. Then whispers sprouted like weeds. Who is she? Where did she come from? So dangerous. People rushed to redefine what they had just witnessed. Victoria patched together her dignity, muttering, "She's suspicious." Philip stood up, collar crooked, voice hoarse. "Just luck." The door burst open. Police flooded in, radios crackling, boots striking the floor like the beat of drums calling people back to life. An older officer stopped short when he saw Maya, eyes widening, then softening. "Staff Sergeant Brooks," he said quietly. Maya gave a slight nod. "I just wanted a normal night." The words were thin as mist, yet carried the full weight of order, the kind preserved by 15 seconds. The silence had barely settled before whispers sprouted like thorns. Heads lifted above the table edges, eyes shifting focus from the gun barrel to the unarmed woman. Maya stood still, palms open, her breath steady. The knife lay on the white cloth like a fish returned to water. "She's dangerous," Victoria said, gripping her purse strap, her voice sharp with a branded kind of judgment. "Normal people don't fight like that." The word normal spun slowly in the air, searching for something to cling to, a piece of prejudice. "Saving lives is fine," Amber added, wiping her mascara. "But this is a restaurant, not a battlefield." Neil shot up from his chair, wobbling under the weight of wine and responsibility. "Maya, do you realize we could be sued?" The words we could clung to, rules like a soft, uncertain raft. His eyes darted around, looking for someone to nod, to validate his fear. The police weren't here, Sam replied quietly, setting a glass down like placing a period at the end of a sentence. 15 seconds was enough to save lives. From behind the counter, Eli whispered, You saved us." His voice was thin as thread, but it stitched together a torn corner of the night. Daniel fastened his jacket button and spoke only 3 words. "That's enough. Officer!" He turned toward the older policeman. The man removed his cap, his weathered face breaking into a slow, warm smile. "Mark O'Connor," he said, then looked at Maya, his tone sinking into old memory. "Staff Sergeant Maya Brooks, Naval Special Operations Counterterrorism. In 2018, she pulled me out of a burning truck. Tonight, she pulled this entire room out of fear. The room changed the way it breathed." Philip opened his mouth to argue, but the language of condescension stuck in his throat when he heard the words "Special Operations." Victoria lifted her chin, trying to rebuild the wall of class with the scent of perfume. "Whatever she is," she muttered, "she doesn't belong here." "What does belong here mean?" Daniel asked, his voice flat as stone. "To sit still while a gun sweeps past your neighbor's throat," a man in a blue tie interjected. "Maybe she's one of them. A setup." Mark's smile faded. "Then explain to me why one of them broke her own leader's jaw." A burst of awkward laughter rippled and died just as fast. The elderly woman in the velvet dress, her pearls already removed, stepped forward and placed a wrinkled napkin into Maya's hand. "You dropped this," she said. She hadn't, but it was the only way the woman knew how to say thank you. Neil drew in a deep breath. "According to policy, any act of violence, I'm required to suspend you." He used the word required as a shield to hide behind. Sam froze for half a second, his eyes turning cold. "You're firing the person who just kept your guests and staff safe." Eli nodded furiously, as if afraid the truth might fall away. "This is a restaurant, not a military base," Amber scoffed. "Every place needs someone who can stay calm," Daniel replied, his voice rising for the first time. "And tonight that person is standing right in front of you." He turned toward Maya. "Tomorrow morning, if you agree, you'll be head of security at Hart Holdings." The room tilted. A low gasp rippled, then hushed. Philip swallowed hard. Victoria lost her breath. Trevor stared at his shoes. Amber almost cracked a joke, then thought better of it. Maya looked at the hand Daniel offered. In her gaze, old roads reappeared, training fields at night, smoke comrades after action reports, the signed papers to leave the force and learn how to live quietly. Tonight, quiet didn't mean hiding. It meant standing tall. "What about your job here?" Neil stammered. "I'll resign properly," Maya said. She placed her hand in Daniel's, a firm, simple handshake without pretense. The room didn't applaud, but a few eyes lowered of their own accord, as if accepting a new order. Mark nodded, sealing the moment. "Once we finish the paperwork, she's free to go." Sam added softly, without an exclamation mark. "Congratulations." Eli whispered, "I saw it." And somewhere in that fragile quiet, the room spoke in a language it rarely used: respect. Daniel's promise struck the molten night like a seal pressed into wax. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Every face in the Marlowe reflected a new kind of helplessness. The helplessness of people who had just lost their old definition of worth. Neil clung to the counter as if to the edge of a boat in rough seas. "Mr. Hart, this isn't—" "There are no conditions," Daniel cut in, his voice flat but weighted. "You'll cover the full bill for tonight, give a bonus to every frontline employee, and express gratitude through action, not statements." He nodded toward Sam and Eli. "That includes you both." Victoria sat upright, fixing her lipstick. "You're romanticizing danger," she said, leaning on the English word for strength. I value those who can maintain order, Daniel replied, and tonight she was the only one who did. Philip tried to speak about crisis management experience, but the words left his mouth like a broken kite with no wind. A middle-aged woman in a silk scarf stepped forward, placing a wrinkled napkin into Maya's hand, a clumsy but honest gesture. "Thank you, dear," she said softly, cheeks flushed as if crossing an invisible border. Maya accepted it, brushing her fingertips against the woman's. Human warmth, she thought, is a language every wall understands. Sam brought her a glass of water. "The one who stands firm is always the thirstiest," he said quietly. The cool water washed away the lingering taste of gun smoke. Maya took a sip, thanking him with her eyes. Eli gathered all his courage to step out from behind the counter. "I'm proud," he stammered, carrying the word proud, as if it weighed more than he could handle, but he didn't drop it. The police took statements. Radios painted thin lines of static across the air. The three robbers, handcuffed and heads bowed, walked out to the metallic clink of chains echoing behind them. Mark leaned toward Maya. "When you've got time, come by the academy, say a few words to the cadets. Teach them how to breathe under pressure." Maya smiled faintly. "I'll bring a glass of water." Neil tried to summon the last trace of his authority. Maya. "It's fine," she said, saving him from himself. "Everyone's tired. Let's close the shift." The kindness just right in measure softened the edges of his pride. Daniel signed a check heavy enough to make gratitude feel like duty. "Pack us something to go," he told Sam. For the first time that night, Maya realized she was hungry. She laughed. "I'd forgotten what that felt like." "Do you regret it?" Mark asked, half joking. "Normal," Maya said, gazing through the glass doors where Chicago exhaled its cold breath. "Isn't avoiding the storm, it's knowing how to put the chairs back afterward." Daniel listened to her words like a man cupping a seed in his palm. Business cards changed hands. 9 o'clock. On time. Like tonight. Like tonight. They repeated the words, locking into a new rhythm. Around them the staff began sweeping up crystal. The gentle scrape of brooms sounded like light rain. On the VIP table, a fresh glass of Bordeaux sat filled to the rim, deep red and still. No one touched it. In that crimson reflection, the Marlowe saw another version of itself, less proud, more grateful. The night ended with hastily thrown coats, slow steps, and unsent apologies. But one thing left the room with Maya, a new order, quiet, unspoken, yet lasting like the crease of a white napkin. Dawn had not yet cleared the mist from the lake when an 18-second clip covered every platform. Maya tilts her head, disarms, takes the gun, shatters the glass, table, twists her wrist, sets the knife down and says, "It's over." No music, no effects, only steady breathing in the storm. The headlines flooded in. Waitress takes down 3 armed robbers in 15 seconds who had the last laugh at Gold Coast, the anonymous staff sergeant. Local television invited Mark O'Connor. He spoke slowly without embellishment. "She once saved my life. Last night she kept a whole room alive by staying calm." A stamp of truth placed in a sea of speculation. A secondary clip, slightly shaky, captured Philip Kane's Bordeaux line in full. The caption read, "He can manage money, but not character." Comments poured like rain. "Pull your investments." Reputation is the new credit risk. By afternoon, a few asset management accounts hinted that major clients were reconsidering. Cold. Precise. Victoria tripped over her own voice. The line, "Did you come from a shelter?" was now paired with a photo from the gala. Sponsors responded with an email, polished but firm, "Schedule change." Her social circle dimmed. Perfume could not bridge the widening distance. Trevor tried to spin the trend with a black-and-white story, "Courage doesn't brag." The internet replied by reviving the old clip of his bet about dropping the tray. The story disappeared. His funding round was temporarily under review. Amber locked her Instagram. Her post OOTD at the Marlowe was screenshotted and placed next to her quote. She wants to be famous, and the question appeared beneath, who's performing now? The Marlowe issued a safety statement. We prioritize the well-being of our guests and thank the authorities. No names, no specific gratitude. Review groups split in two. Some praised the kitchen, others called for a boycott over treatment of staff. Neil read it, sweat soaking through his shirt. Sam texted Maya, "Don't read the comments." Eli quietly logged off. Elsewhere, long essays began to surface when silence is a survival skill, the crowd and the waitress's chair. Under the hashtag, I was Maya, cashiers, drivers, and night guards began sharing their stories. From a single name, Maya became a position, a place to stand tall in a room. Maya's phone buzzed non-stop. She posted nothing. Daniel texted 9 o'clock. Mark sent a fist emoji. Sam, eat breakfast. Eli, I'm proud. Neil typed a long message, then deleted it, leaving only 2 words. I'm sorry. A national news outlet called. Maya answered simply, I'm not the story. Order is. On the other end of the line, there was half a beat of silence, just enough to understand why that 18-second clip kept spreading without any soundtrack at all. 8:57 in the morning, 42nd floor of Hart Holdings. The glass doors opened to the gray-blue skyline of Chicago. Maya walked in dark shirt hair, tied neatly, each step measured and quiet. The line of executives stopped talking, as if someone had turned the volume down. Daniel nodded. Right on time. We're not hiring a symbol, Daniel said. We're building a system. He outlined 3 layers. First, real-time risk recognition. Second, calm response training for frontline staff. Third, minimal violence reaction procedures. Maya continued, We prioritize human safety. It starts with how you breathe, how you stand, how you look. When done right, most situations don't require touching anyone. A silver-haired executive smirked. You mean teach breathing? Maya nodded. Yes. Teaching breathing costs less than a lawsuit. A small laugh rippled through the room, not mocking, but understanding. Haley. Nguyen, 26. The assistant who had hidden behind the counter last night distributed folders, floor plans, safe space zones, and short speech templates. Maya pointed with her pen. Not every space needs filling. Knowing where to leave space is also a skill. One manager asked, How do you stop being afraid? Maya replied, There are 2 kinds of fear, the kind that rises to your eyes and the kind that sinks to your feet. I choose the second, so it keeps me grounded. After the meeting, Daniel asked, What do you need? A small room for silent training, she said. A mirror, some tape, a few chairs, and an old crackling radio. Daniel smiled for the first time. Why crackling? It mimics real conditions. Noise teaches focus. Maya's desk remained simple. An old photo of a 20-year-old girl in uniform, sunlight slanting across her face, and a small card from Haley that read, Thank you for letting us breathe. Maya placed the card beside the photo and smoothed its edge like folding a napkin. In the afternoon, she went down to the lobby to practice her move through a crowd without causing ripples exercise. Security guards smiled. The receptionist nodded. Someone walking by asked, Aren't you the one who... No. Maya said, half joking, half sincere. I'm the one who keeps the door. The phrase was both humor and truth, her new title in her own mind, to keep order so others could pass safely. On the steps outside, the river wind stung her face. A street vendor offered her a cheap, beaded bracelet. For luck, he said. Memory surged back, the dusty heat of a small town, sirens, the training ground at night, the burning truck. Maya bought the bracelet and slipped it into her pocket beside the card. To remember where I stand, she thought. That evening, the Marlowe posted another apology for the inconvenience still nameless. Sam sent a screenshot and joked, "Has the new boss booked a table yet?" Maya replied with a water glass emoji. Mark texted, "The interns are waiting for their breathing lesson." Eli, "I just signed up for night security training." The glass of the 42nd floor reflected the city glowing like liquid light. Maya stood straight, shoulders relaxed, palms open. No triumph, no slogan, only a moral line drawn anew. Breathe, observe, make room, speak less. Her silence from now on was no longer a shield. It was the language of order, low in tone, but resonant enough to carry far. From the perspective of security and crowd psychology experts, the core value of this story does not lie in the takedown itself, but in the architecture of calm. It is about real-time risk recognition, physiological regulation, breathing posture, and focus to keep the brain from panicking, and the ethics of action, neutralizing with minimal violence and preserving human life to the fullest. When these three layers align, calmness becomes the true strength of leadership.